slowly over the hill to the southwest. It was too slow for an aircraft. When he accidentally pointed his flashlight at it, the UFO accelerated directly towards him as if reacting. He covered the light and the UFO stopped and hovered some 300 yards in front of him. There was no sound. A beam of light came from the bottom of the craft and swept the ground directly beneath it once. A search beam? The UFO then slowly drifted to the right. Other beams were shining from it, and there were ice crystals in the air, so they were easy to see. A greenish phosphorescent beam horizontally from the front, right. Two beams at the back, left, rotated slowly to a horizontal position. Pal 1 ran across to a small clearing. When he looked back, the UFO had gone. At about the same time, Pal 2 and 3 were traveling towards Pelly Crossing. They spotted a huge row of rectangular lights to the north, moving slowly left to right. They pulled over and got out to see more. Pal 2 noticed that the length of the lights was about the same as the width of the Big Dipper, which was above it. An important reference to help calculate the size. Also, around that time, 4 women, that's Pal 4, 5, 6, and 7, were taking a break from an evening course at a community college in Pelly Crossing. They were outside the building looking westward when they observed rows of lights moving almost directly towards them. They then disappeared behind a hill. The lights, that is, not the women.
Yeah.
4 men, CRM 1, 2, 3, and 4, saw the UFO while traveling in a pickup truck on a highway near the village of Carmack. They pulled over and watched as it moved slowly and silently to the northeast, curve around towards the microwave tower, where it just vanished. CRM 1 said it was about 7 o'clock. CRM 5, 6, 7, 6, 7, 8, and 9, a couple with their 3 children, were watching the TV that evening when they saw a row of lights through their window. They watched it move slowly over the tree line, northwest to northeast. There was no noise. Then it seemed to blink off. The lights disappeared, one by one, as if behind an invisible wall. But there was no mountain or hill in that direction. Being just before Christmas, the children explained it easily. They said it was Santa Claus and his reindeer. Humans are poor at judging the size of an object at distances over 30 feet. But by triangulation, using known reference points from witness accounts, it was possible to calculate a size range. The giant craft was between half a mile to just over a mile in diameter. This UFO was enormous by any standard. This case has been investigated by local researchers and documented by various groups. The area isn't heavily populated. Some witnesses contacted local radio stations, but most wanted to remain anonymous, hence the code names. Some were so traumatized and chose not to talk at all. One boy, unavailable for comment, was riding his bicycle over a bridge when the object hovered directly above. Terrified, he put his face to the ground and lay still. His grandmother said he was scared to go outside for weeks.
Wow.
This sighting may have encompassed a larger area, as there were reports of sighting in Dawson, Mayo, Watson Lake, and CBC North Radio reported them the next day. No witnesses from these communities have so far come forward. The investigation is ongoing, and there have been unsubstantiated reports from other towns and witnesses. Given the number of witnesses and their aversion to going public, this is unlikely to be a hoax. The case is still pending review, so there are no official explanations. Alternatives are limited. It could perhaps have been some kind of rare magnetospheric phenomena, or a mirage, or maybe an experimental government craft. But all these are unlikely. The number of witnesses and the consistence of their description, shape, material, light pattern, spread over 130 feet, 4 miles, makes it very hard to believe that this was a misidentification of a prosaic event or hoax. There have been numerous other sightings in this region. From the evidence, it's very likely that this UFO was a physical object rather than a mirage, aurora, or hoax. This case really deserves much more attention than it has hitherto received. So, if you're ever traveling the Klondike Highway on a quiet winter night, you might find yourself looking up at the stars, waiting to see something big.
Wow. That's a great story. When did you say that report came from?
That was December 11th, 1996.
Okay, so it's fairly recent.
Yes.
You know, that description of the craft of being so humongous and then the lights kind of extinguishing one after one, it reminds me of a case in Phoenix, Arizona, and for all of you listeners out there, you may be familiar with the big Phoenix light sighting right around the same, ballpark of time around the end of the 90s there. And it was, it reminded me of that because it was really humongous and all the lights went off one by one and it was witnessed by a lot of people and it was kind of, it wasn't really taken seriously by the residents, by the people in charge in Phoenix, especially Fife Symington, who kind of made a whole mockery of it by bringing in the culprit of the lights. It was one of his people that worked in his office dressed up as a big extraterrestrial in handcuffs. It reminds me of that story. And, I was so close to living up in that area at one point that I'm almost kind of familiar with the area.
Oh, yeah.
Where did you get that report from? Is that a MUFON report?
Yeah, let me just look up the source here. Just hang on.
Yeah, it's always good to throw that in so other people can look it up. What can they search or Google in order to find that one? I guess it would be Yukon UFO 96.
Yukon mothership incident.
That is such a massive craft, too, half a mile wide.
Yeah, yes, investigated by local researchers and documented by various groups, NUFOS,
yeah,
NICAP, and MUFON.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. I was speaking to a military aerospace historian last month. He was on last week's episode, Sylvia,
yeah,
and he mentioned these hangars that were seen by whistleblowers that have come forward that were the size of, what's the name of that aircraft? Is it I think it's
the big one,
like
Boeing.
Yeah, it's like a B-52 or something to that nature. It's just
717 was a big one. I'm not sure, but there is a very big Boeing, the biggest in the world, I think.
Yeah, I can't remember. This is specifically a military aircraft. I think it was the B. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. It was one of the biggest military aircraft, and it was the opening to the hangar was twice the size of two of those put together, wingtip to wingtip, which kind of indicates that there's something going on there behind closed doors of some massive craft. So you never know, right? It's like you said there, it could be some sort of military craft, but you're going to leave us scratching our heads because there's no answers at this point.
Yes, that's right. It seemed to me when I was reading the report of the trapper that was shown his torch at it, it seemed like they were looking for something, maybe one of their own, or
prospecting for something up there in the Yukon, hey?
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Well, thanks for coming by for another exciting installment of Calendar of the Paranormal. This is Mrs. Sylvia Richards on the Unified Field.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, Sylvia.
Good night.
This is Sun by Caribou on CKDU. You're listening to Atlantic Canada's only paranormal radio broadcast. And I want to say hello out there in Radioland to Mr. Kenley, Todd, and Alicia. Visiting from the West, and of course, the legendary Jeremy. Hello, bud. And another guy we have kicking around these parts these days I haven't seen in a long time is an old buddy Mark. How you doing, man? While we're on this train, this is a beautiful instrumental to go into our next story. Whitley Strieber's reported from his website, Unknown Country, that very large objects are said to be on their way to planet Earth. Now, according to a SETI source, we're talking about a mid-December collision with planet Earth. Get ready for it, 2012. Happenstance that it's right on time and target for the end of the Mayan calendar. I don't know what you all think about that. It's hard to kind of trace this story as well. But I want to read you exactly what this says here. The story was written by Andrew Wozni of the UFO Examiner. You can check it out yourself on theexaminer.com. 3 very large objects in space flying to Earth. E.T. does not need to phone home anymore. Someone or something is on its way to Earth. SETI astrophysicist Craig Krasnov has announced the approach to the Earth of 3 very large, fast-moving objects. The length of the flying saucers is in the range of tens of kilometers. Landing, according to calculations of scientists, should be in mid-December 2012. The date, of course, coincides with the end of the Mayan calendar, my friends. A very few large objects rapidly approaching the Earth, says SETI astrophysicist Craig Krasnov. Don't take his word for it. You can check it out for yourself. He recommends to go to the site www.skymap.org, and that's sky-map.org, and enter the coordinates of the giant UFO. I'll tell you the URL. Go to theexaminer.com and look it up. There's a whole bunch of coordinates that you can type into skymap.org and see it for yourself. The project participants are assured that the facilities are absolutely real, and the American Space Agency, NASA, is trying to conceal important information. None of these objects can be seen from the Northern Hemisphere. The second set of numbers in each line tells us that the object or objects is or are coming in from very deep in the Southern Hemisphere sky. In any case, the only thing we can do now, wait for it, says Krasnov. Soon, celestial objects will be visible in a good telescope, of course. So keep your eyes on the skies, as I always say here on the Unified Field. The truth is out there, my friends. You may just be surprised. It may expand you into the infinite or shrink you down to size. So goes the lingo that I say here on the program, the one and only one of its kind, the Unified Field. Atlantic Canada's only paranormal radio broadcast. So that's a really unusual story. I'm not really sure what to make of that yet. If it's true, the implications are terrifying. Would the mass media tell us about impending doom? Or would they want the wheel to continue to spin? The oil continuing to spill, and blood as well. Who knows? Try and find some corroboration if you can, or you know of another story that either denounces the story or corroborates it. Help me by sending that information to unifiedfieldradio@gmail.com. Let's figure that one out. What do we got next on the list? Apparently, a huge, bright meteor was seen over Britain. It was spotted in the skies over Britain, and this one was reported, of course, from the bbc.co.uk. I like to use a lot of really credible, quote-unquote credible, informational media sources. I mean, there is one guy, do I have to mention Rupert Murdoch, that owns considerably more than 90% of the global media, so there's a lot of filters here. But this one comes from BBC. I think not as bad as the rest. It says here that stargazers throughout the UK have reported seeing a meteor-like streak of light in the darkened skies. The BBC was contacted by people in Scotland,